winter of 1897 descended upon Paris like a velvet curtain, thick with fog and secrets. Along the narrow streets of Belatin Quarter, gas lamps flickered against the encroaching darkness, casting long shadows on the wet cobblestones. It was the kind of evening when even the most rational minds could believe in ghosts. At precisely 7:30 on the night of January 14th, a scream pierced the stillness of Rue de Tournon. By the time the gendarmes arrived at the townhouse of renowned literary critic Monsieur Édouard Mercier, the damage was already done. The critic lay slumped over his mahogany writing desk, his fingers still clutching a fountain pen, his face frozen in an expression of profound terror. The room smelled faintly of bitter almonds. Inspector Henri Fournier was summoned from the Préfecture de Police within the hour. A man of measured words and meticulous observation, Fournier had built his reputation on solving cases that others dismissed as accidents or acts of divine retribution. He arrived by carriage, his weathered face illuminated by the lantern he carried, his eyes already scanning for inconsistencies. "Nothing has been disturbed?" he asked the young officer who met him at the door. "No, Inspector. We sealed the room immediately." Fournier nodded and descended the narrow staircase to Mercier's study. The room was a sanctuary of literature, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined with leather-bound volumes, a Persian rug beneath the ornate desk, and heavy velvet curtains drawn against the night. And yet something was profoundly wrong. The air itself felt poison. Mercier's body had been removed to the morgue, but his final position remained evident. The desk held several items of interest: a half-finished review of a controversial novel, a crystal glass containing the dregs of brandy, and most curiously, an opened letter bearing no signature. The paper was fine, expensive, watermarked with a subtle pattern Fournier recognized as belonging to a particular stationer on Rue Saint-Honoré. He lifted the letter to the lamplight and read the elegant script. "Your words have destroyed lives, Édouard. Tonight, you drink from the same cup you have served to others. Consider this your final review." "Poison?" the young officer ventured. "Almost certainly," Fournier replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "But administered by whom? And why announce it so theatrically?" The inspector began his methodical examination. The brandy glass bore traces of a white residue along its rim. The letter's ink was fresh, written within the past day. Most tellingly, the desk drawer stood slightly ajar, as though someone had rifled through it in haste. Inside the drawer, Fournier discovered a leather-bound journal, its pages filled with Mercier's cramped handwriting. He flipped through entries chronicling literary feuds, scathing assessments of contemporary authors, and a recurring mention of a particular novelist, a woman named Céleste Dubois. "Find everything written about this Céleste Dubois," Fournier instructed. "Reviews, articles, correspondence. I want to know why her name appears 17 times in the past month alone." By morning, the pieces began to assemble themselves. Céleste Dubois had been a rising literary star 3 years prior, her debut novel celebrated for its psychological depth and elegant prose. Then Mercier published his review, a devastating critique that questioned not merely her talent, but her moral character, suggesting plagiarism and intellectual fraud. The novel's publisher withdrew their support. Dubois vanished from Parisian literary society.
Fournier located Dubois in a modest apartment in Montmartre, far from the literary salons she once frequented. She received him with surprising composure, a woman in her early 30s with intelligent eyes and ink-stained fingers. "I knew you would come eventually," she said, gesturing to a worn armchair. "When I heard of Mercier's death, I understood suspicion would fall upon me." "Did you kill him?" Fournier asked directly. "No, Inspector. Though I confess, I have imagined it many times." Her voice carried the weight of profound bitterness. "His review destroyed more than my career. It destroyed my reputation, my livelihood, my future. But I did not poison him." "Then who did?" Celeste rose and walked to her writing desk, retrieving a bundle of letters tied with black ribbon. "These arrived over the past 6 months, anonymous. Each one promised that Mercier would pay for what he had done, not just to me, but to others." Fournier examined the letters carefully. The handwriting matched neither Celeste's nor the threatening letter found at Mercier's desk. But the stationery was identical. The same watermark, the same expensive paper. "Have you shown these to anyone?" "Only my publisher, Monsieur Lavigne. He suggested I ignored them, said they were probably from an admirer seeking to avenge my honor." The inspector's mind sharpened. "Your publisher, Antoine Lavigne?" "Yes, he was the one who withdrew support for my novel after Mercier's review. He said he had no choice, that his reputation would suffer if he stood by me." Fournier stood abruptly. "May I borrow these letters? I believe they may prove essential." By afternoon, the inspector had visited the stationer on Rue Saint-Honoré. The proprietor, an elderly gentleman with precise records, confirmed that this particular paper had been purchased regularly by only 2 clients: the late Mercier himself and Monsieur Antoine Lavigne. The confrontation took place in Lavigne's opulent office overlooking the Seine. The publisher was a distinguished man in his 60s, impeccably dressed, with the careful manners of one accustomed to wielding power through words rather than force. "Inspector Fournier, to what do I owe this unexpected visit?" "I am investigating the murder of Édouard Mercier." Lavigne's expression remained neutral. "A tragedy. Mercier was a difficult man, but a necessary voice in our literary culture." "Was he?" Fournier placed the anonymous letters on the desk. "These were sent to Mademoiselle Dubois over several months. The paper matches purchases you made from a specific stationer. The same paper found in the threatening letter at Mercier's death scene." The publisher's composure faltered slightly. "I purchase a great deal of stationery, Inspector. That proves nothing." "Perhaps, but your handwriting does." Fournier produced a letter from his coat, a business correspondence Lavigne had written months earlier. The elegant script matched perfectly. Lavigne sank into his leather chair, suddenly looking much older. "You understand nothing of what that man did. Mercier didn't merely critique books. He destroyed lives, systematically, deliberately. Celeste was not his first victim. Over 20 years he ruined careers, drove 3 authors to suicide, caused countless others to abandon their craft entirely." "So you appointed yourself judge and executioner?" "I appointed myself nothing." Lavigne's voice trembled with controlled fury. "I sent those letters to Celeste to give her hope, to let her know someone cared about the injustice she suffered. But I never intended to act. Until last week." He opened his desk drawer and withdrew a letter. This one addressed to him personally
from Mercier. Fournier read it carefully. It was a draft of a new review, this time targeting a young poet Levine had recently signed, a brilliant young man from Algeria. Mercier's critique was not merely harsh, but deliberately racist, designed to destroy the poet's debut before it could reach the public. He sent it to me as a warning, Levine said quietly. Told me if I published the collection, this review would follow. I have spent 30 years in this industry, Inspector. I have compromised my principles more times than I can count. But I could not, would not, allow him to destroy another innocent life.
So you poisoned his brandy? I invited him for a private discussion. While he poured drinks, I added the cyanide I'd purchased from a chemist, claiming it was for rat poison. I thought he would drink it later, alone. I wrote the letter so there would be a reason, so people would understand why. I never expected it to happen while I was still there. But when he raised the glass to toast our understanding, I could not stop him. Fournier studied the broken man before him. You watched him die? I did, and I have not slept since. Levine stood, offering his wrists. I am ready to face justice, Inspector. Though I wonder if true justice was served the moment Mercier drew his last breath. The inspector placed the handcuffs gently, almost regretfully. Justice is not ours to determine, Monsieur Levine. It belongs to the law, imperfect as it may be. 3 weeks later, Inspector Fournier stood in the courtroom as the verdict was read. Antoine Levine was sentenced to 15 years for murder, though the judge acknowledged the complexity of motive and circumstance. Celeste Dubois attended the trial, sitting quietly in the back, her expression unreadable. As Fournier descended the courthouse steps into the grey Parisian afternoon, he reflected on the strange mathematics of justice. One life taken to prevent the destruction of others. One man's cruelty answered by another's desperate act. The law had spoken, but the moral calculation remained frustratingly incomplete. He thought of Mercier's final expression, that look of terror frozen on his face. Had the critic understood, in those final moments, the cumulative weight of the damage he had inflicted? Or had he died believing himself a victim of random malice? The inspector would never know. What he did know was this: words possessed power, sometimes more dangerous than any poison. They could elevate or destroy, illuminate truth or obscure it entirely. And those who wielded that power carelessly should not be surprised when it eventually turned against them. As evening fell over Paris once more, Fournier returned to the prefecture, his notebook filled with observations, his mind already turning toward the next case. The city never stopped producing mysteries, and he would never stop pursuing truth through the shadows. Behind him, the gas lamps flickered to life, one by one, small points of warmth against the gathering darkness. The poison pen had been silenced, but somewhere in the literary salons and publishing houses, other words were being written, other reputations being forged or destroyed. Justice, Fournier understood, was not a single verdict, but an endless pursuit. And he would continue walking that path, lantern in hand, seeking truth wherever it might hide.